This is part of why I have my shadow banning and stuff is because there's some stuff going down with Trump and Elon. Let me tell you, because I was on a spaceship with Mr. Elon. Okay, and this is one where I was kind of watching, but I mean, I knew I was watching, and I knew that I was not to be seen. You know what I mean? Like I'm just looking. I'm not interacting with anyone.
Prove to me that you are alive.
What's really good, everybody? Welcome to the one, to the only. Prove to me that you're alive. I'm tired of saying this, but we are the most shadow banned channel on the internet. Today, we have a guest that's also been very much shadow banned. Why? Because she's fearless. She speaks the truth. She is a family member to the channel. She's a dear friend. She's always supporting, always reaching out, and we are so grateful to her. She's a children's book author. She's a jack of many trades, and I'm sure she's gonna get into all of them. She's also a host of the Willow Roots YouTube channel. You can also find her on Willow Roots on Instagram, so on and so forth. And all the links we will plug into the description. Before I let this special guest introduce herself, I just want to say that these people are very, very special and are very necessary for the times that we are living in, and that's why I've been bugging this guest for so long, like, please come on, please come on. So she's finally been kind enough to find the time, and she's here, and it's the one, the only Julia Willow Roots. I'm gonna give you a round of applause. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and do this. I
Man,
haven't spoken to a lot of people, so it's nice.
we really appreciate you. And again, like, this is just two regular people having a conversation. That's all it is. Sometimes it's good to forget about the cameras and stuff like that. The only reason why I think these conversations are usually important is again because the times, well, we're always been living through some sort of times, but especially now with so much misinformation and the media being controlled and manipulated to this very high extent. I think people like you are very important. I always stay in touch with your posts. I always stay in touch with your comments. I go onto your Instagram because you have some sort of great insight, and that's why I've been bugging you for so long, so I cannot thank you enough. um
I
how do you want
appreciate that. Thank you.
how do you want me to what do you want me to call you by, Julia or Willow Roots, or
We can go by Willow for now.
okay.
That's the I go by many names. It's kind of a thing for me. Um, and I've actually just recently adopted another name because of my spiritual awakening that I've gone through. I've adopted Yarusha.
Okay. I want to get into all of that. That sounds super interesting. So listen, Willow, we like to do, the regular thing on this channel to give people an opportunity to kind of find out your background, like where you from, what was your upbringing, and you mentioned something before we started recording that you learned English from the Dr. Seuss books. It blows my mind because I thought you were a gringa. I thought you were American. So if you give us, a background, where are you from? What was your childhood like? What were some of your inspirations or people that inspired you? Things like that. Just it could be long, it could be short, whatever. We're here.
Okay, well, I was born in Ulm, Germany. I come from a military background. Lots of people in my family have been in the military. My dad came from a military family as well. So I was born there, only lived there for a couple of years, and then we moved to the United States. We moved to Pennsylvania for a very short while, just transitioning to where my dad was being stationed out in Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. And Missouri is where I spent most of my childhood and my young adult life. My dad, because he came from a military background, they moved around a lot, and he didn't want that for us. So we had 200 acres out there, a tree farm. When I say farm, people always, assume like animals and things, but it was oak trees and walnut and cedar. And so that's where I grew up in a little town called Salem, which is very interesting too because I discovered that part of my family history was involved with the Salem witch trials. So I find it interesting that I then grew up in Salem,
I was just
Missouri.
gonna ask you that. That's yeah. So, but you said Missouri, right? Because from what I understand, there's a Salem, Massachusetts, or is that like
Right,
what's this?
Salem, Massachusetts is the witch trials, but this is Salem, Missouri, where I grew up at.
Okay, okay. So did they have something like that going on in Missouri, in Salem, Missouri, also
I
with
believe so, and with the things that have gone into my life, I definitely think that there was some kind of a coven out there. There was growing up, we had like those little superstitious things, but there was this place down by the river that they called Witch's Altar that I had gone to a couple times, and there was also this little town called Cherryville. I think it was Cherryville, where all the kids claimed that there was a cemetery and it had this large steps to go up to the cemetery. And
Mhm.
everyone would claim that you would count the steps going up and it would be a different number coming down. So it
Whoa.
was like a portal or something. And I did get the guts to go out there one night, but when we went out there, these lights in the distance started coming up on us. So we got freaked out and we just left. And I haven't been back since.
That's crazy. So how long did you live in out there in Salem, Missouri?
I lived out there. I lived out in Missouri around abouts until I was about 25. It was 2011 that I moved then to Pennsylvania. And I lived in Pennsylvania until 2024. And that's when I moved here to Ecuador.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you are in Ecuador. But how would you characterize your childhood upbringing? Like, was it an easy childhood? Was it a tough childhood? Like, were both of your parents there? Like, like what was the emotional and the spiritual state of your upbringing?
So while I was in it, I thought it was normal. And I thought it was normal for a very long time up until the past like 5 years when I started questioning some things. Um, It was isolated. We didn't have any other family out there. So it was me and my mom and my dad, my two sisters, and my one brother. I had another brother. Both of my brothers are half brothers. And the one brother lived in Pennsylvania with his mom. So he only came and stayed with us during the summers. And it was it was very dysfunctional kind of family, honestly. None of us knew anything about my one brother, about his father, which he passed away in 2018. He suffered from addiction, severe addiction, and that's what eventually he passed away from in 2018. My dad did suffer from alcoholism for a little time. There's recovery. Everyone's recovery looks different. He
Hmm.
did eventually stop drinking, but there were some tough times during that time that he was drinking that really made an impact um, on my life. And I want to say that I love my family, but there is a lot of generational healing and trauma that needs to be done. Unfortunately, my mother has some very narcissistic personality characteristics. She's very controlling, overbearing, and at this moment, I do not talk to anyone in my family. No one.
I'm so thankful that you're able to be honest with us, and I just want to add that I've been thinking about this a lot lately. That it's very hard to find quote unquote like a normal family these days, if that makes any sense. Like from what I'm seeing is everyone has some kind of a dysfunction, and I can relate to you because I had the same thing. My dad was a drinker, and he was a mean drinker. My mom had some of the qualities that you just described. So I understand, and I'm so thank you for being honest, and that's what this is all about. Is being transparent and honest, because you never know, you might be helping someone that's going to hear this. So how would you describe Willow as a teenager? What were you like when you were a teenager?
Oh, goodness gracious. Me as a teenager was crazy. I was, I was, I was the golden child for so long, and it's definitely like we all know the narcissistic, dynamics in the family. And for a very long time, I was the golden child. I had cancer whenever I was 2, so I was a cancer survivor. And
Oh
I
my
think that's
God.
where, yeah, I think that's where my mother's like overbearingness came from, because I almost died. And so it's like it just became like a real
I'm sorry. I'm
overprotective
so sorry to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. What kind of cancer?
leukemia.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations, man. Okay, so go back to your story. So you were the golden child. Everyone was jumping around you and trying to make sure that you're good, right?
Yeah. And yeah, because I was sick and I was always very outgoing. I spoke my mind, and early on, I've had visions and dreams and things. So I was always, I don't know, I was the golden child up until like 16, 17. That's when things just kind of went downhill. It was a tough time because my brother too, he was heavy into drugs at that point, and he was getting arrested. He was coming home drunk, having fights with mom and dad. And so then a lot of tension was going on to him. And I guess sort of in a way that I might have started doing things too, because then I wanted some of the attention. And that's just how it went. We were always constantly fighting for the attention because it just seemed like it went to like one of us at a time. And so they weren't very good at like delegating that. It was rough too because dad was in the military. So he was sometimes deployed for years at a time. I think one time was 3 years he was gone. And that was really hard on my brother, I think, because he didn't have a father figure. And that
Mm.
was right during his preteen years. And my mother just did not know how to handle it. And yeah, so that's when I started my addiction journey. So I will say I'm a recovered addict and alcoholic myself, which is something.
What was your drug of choice? And I just before you go on, I want to say I'm in recovery also, and this is why. And my drug of choice was opioids. I loved the way it felt. I even snorted heroin. Never shot up, thank God. But because I was going through some emotional stuff, we what it is we start self medicating, and it's not an excuse.
Right.
That's actually what it is. We all start self medicating, and that's why, like, again, I want to thank you again for being transparent and remind everyone this is exactly why we share our stories, because we are real people like all of you out there, right? We're not some heavenly beings descended from heaven, and we're like trying to tell you what's good or what's bad. No, we actually gone through that stuff. So you said around 16 and stuff is when you kind of started to experiment, life. So what was your drug of choice? What did you like?
Well, it started with weed, marijuana, and alcohol, but it quickly escalated with methamphetamine. Unfortunately, that's right where I grew up, was the methamphetamine capital for a
Yeah.
while in the
Yeah.
United States.
Hmm.
I had a friend who wanted to lose weight, and she was like, there was three of us. The three of us, we always did everything together. So we were like, if you're doing it, then we're doing it too, and that's how that all started.
Hmm. I want to ask you something. Well, we're very personal, but I want to ask you. Maybe you can remember the time when you were going through it, and I take it you were smoking meth, or were you I tried meth too. So, like, were you smoking or were you taking it?
Smoking and snorting. I never shot anything up either.
Okay,
I
okay.
couldn't bring myself to do that.
So let me ask you, maybe you can remember, what were you feeling like internally when you were on the calm down? Like, let's say, the night before you getting high, the next day, like, what did you feel internally?
Well, when you're on it, you feel like you're on top of the world. And I used to tell people, like, when I was on it, I felt like I was accomplishing so much. And looking back, I was just a hamster in a friggin' wheel. I wasn't accomplishing anything, but you feel like you're doing so much. And then when you're coming down, I felt tired and just wanted to sleep, you know.
Did
I
you
never
ever have
really
like
suffered
feelings
from
of
like
did you ever have feelings of like guilt and stuff like that?
oh yeah, oh yeah. There was there was guilt, you know. Um, just looking at myself in the mirror and being like, what am I doing to myself? Why am I doing this? But I liked being awake and like feeling like I was getting stuff done. I think I don't. It gave me like a sense of accomplishment when I felt like I really wasn't accomplishing anything, I suppose.
That's not the only thing. See, there was a reason why I asked you that question. Is usually what I'm noticing is throughout life is like spiritual people. If we're all spiritual beings, but people that are coming into the awakening, into the knowledge in this lifetime, what I notice is that we start sometimes when we find that medication, right, that kind of calms us down or whatever, or gets us up to accomplish stuff. What I've noticed is that for us, people that are coming into the awakening, is sometimes the line between what is a physical pleasure and a spiritual pleasure gets blurred, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah, all of a sudden, because we feel like this is a good feeling, right? Like, I remember, taking opioids, taking Percocets. Like, it was such a pleasant feeling where at some moments I'm thinking, this is spiritual, I'm having a spiritual experience, while all it was just, the chemical
Right.
disposition in my body, doing its own biology and stuff. And
Like a copycat of it, because now that I've been clean and stuff and especially how deep I am on my spiritual path, like I find that I'm the same way. Like with the tennis, I have my ups and my downs,
bingo.
but it's not, because it's not drug induced. It's a spiritual awakening journey. It's a wave.
Bingo. And the reason why I asked you is, did you have the feeling of guilt? Because I remember having such a feeling of guilt the next day, like on the calm down or whatever. And I've noticed that the people that I would do drugs with, they weren't feeling like that, So, and now that I'm older, I'm realizing that it's our soul, like, kind of still battling, fighting for us. It's fighting the physical, it's fighting for us. And that's why the feeling of remorse, doesn't go away. Like, it's there, it's present, it's the voice of God, constantly reminding us, um, that, maybe try going the other way. But then again, I think the very important thing is to become okay with our past and realize that we chose, I don't know if you agree with this or not, that we chose these experiences for a reason in this lifetime. Do you kind of find that also?
Oh, this is a concept that I kind of struggle with. I know it's one that it definitely floats around in the in the spiritual community about this choosing these experiences. Like some days I'm like, yes, I chose to do this. I come down this, this is part of my mission and all this. And then there's days where I'm like, who in their right mind would choose to do this? Like, why? Why am I choosing to do this? This is why no one should have to go through this.
Hmm.
And me being a teacher, because I was a teacher for 20 years, I like to look at life as a classroom. And I think about me as a teacher and how I would teach my students. I don't purposely try to put my students through suffering and trauma to make them grow and learn. To me, it feels like such a sadist concept, and
Mm,
it feels like it just perpetuates the cycle. Like,
mm,
oh, you have to suffer, you have to go through this stuff because this is how you learn and grow. But when you really look at what kind of a classroom and environment a child needs, it's not full of suffering and trauma. It's safe, it's love, it's freedom of exploration, you know? Yeah.
that's so can you take us back to the time, because you said that throughout your childhood and teen years you started to get visions and dreams. Can you kind of get into that? Like what were they,
Yeah.
and when did you start noticing you're going through something like that?
All right. So this is a lot of it. It's crazy because a lot of the visions honestly didn't connect dots until just recently, like the past year and a half. And I'm like, holy crap, that's what that was all about. Um, but so like one of the visions I had when I was very young, I warned my parents because I had this vision and this dream that my sister was a serial killer and she was killing our whole family and I like had to stop her.
Wow.
So that was a crazy one. And then there was, and these weren't necessarily dreams or visions, but it was like instances. For example, I remember sitting down at the table with my family, and we used to have like little discussions. Like they would bring up some kind of a question, and the question for this discussion was, "What did we think God looked like?" So it was my turn, and I said, "Well, for all we know, God could be a giant ice cube." And right after I said that, the lights, everything in the entire house went out. It went
Whoa.
black. And we just stopped talking. And I was like, I'm so sorry, God. I did not mean to call you an ice cube. But yeah, that resonates with what happened on my spiritual awakening and my whole diving into Antarctica and the whole talking about like clones and bodies being like held in ice and things. And I feel like that was sort of like a premonition or something of that. Because I've
Wow.
also then had other instances with electricity. Somehow my energy, something about me interacts with electricity.
Right.
It's kind of like it can sometimes be a warning system, or sometimes it's a synchronicity, or it's hard to tell sometimes.
Like lights will start flickering and stuff, right?
Yeah. And and this is where this it kind of jumps around. Like it's so hard to stay linear because I mean, in the spiritual world and realm, there is no time. You know, it's like this big spiral. But just before I moved to Ecuador, I met this guy who I my understanding of him has to be some kind of a Nephilim being or something. But on my way to go meet with him one night, all of the lights in my car just went out. And I was out in the middle of nowhere trying to drive in the pitch dark, and all of the lights in my car went out. Like everything, it was still driving and everything, but all the lights went out.
Whoa.
And I cannot explain why or how, because then the next day, the car was completely fine.
Wow, that's crazy. So when do you think that you started to like question the world? Was it kind of like a a process, or was it maybe you can remember an instance where something shifted in your life and you started to question, like, what am I? Where am I? Like, what is this? You mentioned God and stuff like that. Like, when do you think that journey began in this lifetime?
Honestly, I think it started the day I was born. I think that I've always questioned that. It feels like I've been like pulled away and distracted. sometimes for years at a time. You know, like I would start and then something would pull me away and I'd go down this path and then something would happen and I would get back on path again. But like whenever I was maybe 10, 12 years old, I saw my first like what people would call a ghost. I remember I had woke up in the middle of the night. I had to go to the bathroom, and I look in the doorway, and there is this white being. It was a female being because it looked like I could see long hair, but I was frozen, like paralysis. I couldn't move, and I was so scared. And I was like, I'm not going to the bathroom now. And I closed my eyes and tried to go back to sleep. I peeked and opened them again, and it was gone. And then I was like, I'm still not getting up. I'm going back to sleep. So that's when I felt like there was something in the house. And I always talked to what I called like these ghosts and spirits. And my parents would just chalk it up to my imagination or me just playing. But like I had this one spirit that I called Rose, who I thought died by this man had killed her, and it was my job to find the guy who killed her. So I mean, I'm 8, 10 years old, sitting on the bus, writing down license plate numbers because I'm trying to find the guy who killed Rose. Yeah, and then my very first out of body experience, I was 14 or 15, and this was before I touched any drugs, alcohol, anything,
Right.
nothing. I was in my bedroom, and I just all of a sudden got really thirsty, so I went to the kitchen to go grab a cup of water. And I drank the glass of water, and then heading back to my bedroom, everything just started spinning. And like I couldn't even walk straight. I was holding on to the wall, and I made it down and just laid in my bed. And next thing I know, I'm floating, like my consciousness is like up in the corner of my bedroom, and I'm looking down at myself sitting at the computer. And I'm thinking while I'm up there in this corner, I'm thinking like, what is she doing down there? Like I'm down there, obviously doing something on the computer, but I'm up here. Like what's going on? And then the next thing I know, it's the next morning. I woke up and it was the next morning.
So it was a
So
wow, it was an involuntary out of body experience.
yeah,
That's crazy. I remember Sasha Stone was talking about something like that because usually my first out of body experience was voluntary, like I was do it on purpose, around the same age, like 15, 16, but involuntary. So was this a one case incident, like during that time, or did that happen again?
that experience like that was a one-time thing. Then it turned into more of like lucid dreaming. I began to realize that I was going places while I was sleeping, and I was always a good sleeper. That's
Mhm.
one thing everyone in my family would remember about me is that I loved my sleep. And I think and I still do now because I know that I do so much work when I'm sleeping.
Prove to me that you are alive.
Mhm.
And for some reason, I just like that world better. And half the times, I sometimes think that when I'm awake, I'm actually sleeping, and when I'm sleeping is like the actual real world.
Yeah. Can you describe a little bit? Obviously it's hard to describe in words, but can you describe maybe some of the places that you go when you're sleeping, or when you were sleeping?
Yeah, I mean they're like different galaxies, different dimensions, different planets, different timelines. I know. I have one really vivid memory with me and my dad, and I love this timeline with my dad because it's a timeline of like apocalypse, like seriously zombie apocalypse. But we had like superpowers and we could fly, and me and my dad were fighting off like these zombies. And we had a ship of survivors, and we were trying to set the ship off, but then me and my dad noticed a school bus of zombies that was coming to ramp off and come onto the ship.
Hmm.
So me and my dad both like looked at each other and we're like, we have to stop that bus, and so we jump off the ship and we just head to the bus, and then I woke up.
That sounds amazing. That sounds so amazing. So, do you know, like in the dreams, are you able to tell that you're in a dream, and are you able to control things in your dreams?
Sometimes I'm able to control, sometimes I'm not. You know, sometimes I feel like it's just me watching it. Other times I feel like I'm more a participant in it. I think it just depends on what the mission is, I suppose. Um, like there's, and this is going to be one. This is part of why I have my shadow banning and stuff, is because there's some stuff going down with Trump and Elon. Let me tell you, because I was on a spaceship with Mr. Elon. Okay, and this is one where I was kind of watching, but I mean, I knew I was watching, and I knew that I was not to be seen. You know what I mean? Like I'm just looking. I'm not interacting with anyone, and there was some kind of I remember I needed to use the bathroom or something. I'm like trying to find the bathroom, and the bathroom was like some kind of a weird water, like it gave me reptilian vibes. And then the conversation, I heard Elon talking to someone, telling them, "We'll just give her a book deal. Just give her a book deal, and then maybe she'll shut up and leave us alone." And then I woke up. I guess that's what I needed to see, that he was not on my side. He just wants me to shut up and wants to just, throw a book deal at me.
Yeah, I man, I've been getting into a lot of arguments lately because I'm still, trying to tell people that, look, please, don't be so easily tricked. This whole theater that has been designed for us, it's just that it's a theater. And the more someone has been presented that they're, on the good side and doing good things, the more we should question these, figures of authority. So I think you're right on point, and I want to get into that a little closer later, because again, I think you have so much. I don't think I know. You have so much wisdom to share, because every time you write a comment, or every time you do a post on your page, it's definitely something to look into and to consider. And that's, again, I'm so thankful that you're here. What I wanted to ask you is the time when you were, because I think this is a very important time, and if you don't want to get into it, it's okay, but the time when you were surviving or getting through the cancer, like, can you describe that time period, like from what age to what age, and what was that experience like for you, and what imprint did it leave on your life?
Okay, well, I was diagnosed around 2.5. I mean, it was just after we moved um, to Fort Leonard Wood. Um, and it was up until I was about 4 or 5, because that's when we moved then to Salem. Exactly. We lived in Fort Leonard Wood for a short while before we landed in Salem. But I don't recall a lot. I kind of remember good things more than the bad things. Like for some reason, I remember that the nurses always gave me strawberry shortcake, because for some reason that's something I could eat and stomach when going through the chemo. Um, I don't really remember being bald or anything, but I had like really, really, really curly hair. And then whenever it came back straight. And I remember being kind of sad about it being so straight, which now in the past 8 years, it's gone curly again. So I'm really happy about that. I'm happy to have my curls back. Um, but and this isn't something that I recall. I just know this because I've heard the story, and that they tried to say that my mom had, and I don't know how to say this correctly, Munchausen syndrome, however
Mouch
you call it, where,
Mouchhausen syndrome. Yep.
there we go, yes. They thought she was making me sick because she kept taking me to the hospital. And at this point, she didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any English. And I kept coming in sick, and they just kept saying she has a cold, she has a cold, she has a cold. Then there was one day where my mom got irate, and the MPs, the military police, were actually going to escort her off the property. And a doctor came out, Dr. Lakey, came out and said, I will take a look at her daughter. I will look at her daughter. And she finally ran, and all it took was a simple blood test. That's all they needed to do was a simple blood test. And she said 2 more weeks and I would have been dead. I would have been dead.
That's crazy.
So she saved my life.
Wow. So do you think that now I want to say we're all glad, thank God that you are here. Do you think that after going through that experience is when you started to get, these visions and different, dreams and experiences and out of body experiences? Because there's this whole concept that when we get that close to death, sometimes we leave an imprint in the other world, and that's why people start to get different sort of experiences. Do you find that in your life?
I'm really not sure, just because my memories of that young, I can't be totally sure if there wasn't things that I was already saying or doing. And my family, they don't really open up about the past, truthfully and honestly, anyway.
Hmm.
Um, but I honestly feel like I have a connection to the daughter that my mother had before me that passed away as a stillborn.
Sorry
So
to
I'm a
hear that.
rainbow child,
Mm.
and she gave me the same name that she was going to give her.
Oh, wow.
So, so yeah, so I feel like I have a very strange, weird connection to
Wow,
that
that's
baby.
crazy. Are you okay in your life with the fact that your mom did this? Were you ever resentful for that?
Of what? Of,
That you were named the same name that this child was supposed to have been named.
oh no, I like to me, like I liked it. I
Okay.
felt like it was kind of honoring her
Hmm.
soul in a way.
Yeah, because
Um,
sometimes it's like it could be, the karmic paths can intertwine this way, when you direct the energy from one soul that was supposed to have come in onto the other. Um, so that's interesting. What I forgot to ask you is what's your nationality? What is your background? Because you're saying you guys didn't speak English.
So, well, German was the language that my first language. My
Right.
mother is actually Croatian, Yugoslavia. She grew up in
Oh,
Yugoslavia
you're
and Germany.
Slavic. That's
Yeah.
what it is. Here we go.
So yeah, and I love Croatia. I honestly, my Oma passed away in 2020, and
Sorry.
they had put her house up for sale, but I had just bought a house in 2019, so there's no way that I could sell mine and buy it. And but what I would have done to just move to Croatia, like,
It's beautiful.
yeah,
So
it
on
is.
your mother's side, you're Slavic. What about on your dad's side?
So my dad is actually like the family genealogist. So we're dated back to the Jutes, the Vikings. So Scandinavia and
Wow.
Germanic roots there. And that's kind of
Wow.
where the name Yarusha came from, tying it into that, because he at one point told me that he wanted to name me Jerusha
Hmm.
whenever I was born. And I just switched it to Yarusha because, the J's are Y's.
Yeah.
And
Yarusha, yeah.
I like that. But
Wow. Okay.
so
So
Vikings definitely are in my veins.
wow. Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so when do you feel like you went past the whole experience with drugs and alcohol? Like, were you in your late teens or early 20s? Like, what pushed you to finally change that?
Yeah, so um, I did drugs till in my early adulthood. I did not get clean until 2011, and that was due to I had a car accident in 2010. I did get a DUI for it, although I don't think that I really was. I was actually the designated driver that night, and I had dropped everybody off. Honestly, what caused the accident was I was texting. I was texting the guy that I was seeing at the time, letting him know that I was on my way home. And I can remember, the accident. I can remember me losing control and just telling myself, letting go and being like, here we go. Like that, we're going to have an accident, Jules. There's nothing you can do. You're just going to have to let go. But I broke my neck in 2 places. I had a traumatic brain injury and was in a coma for 3 days.
Wow.
So yeah, and it's crazy though. Even after, because that was 2010, June of 2010. Still for another year, I was in that cycle of using drugs because at this point I had lost my job. I had a broken neck. Was living with my parents. My mom had pretty much like bathed me, and I was pretty low there. And I guess that's when I just started realizing, because the guy that I was seeing with was not a good guy, and I was like, I have got to change something. Like, I had moved out of home whenever I was, going to college. I had tried 2 different colleges and everything. And at this point, I was like, I need to leave Missouri. Like, I have too many connections. I know too many people. I dealt a little bit of drugs back then. So I was, like the one everybody called. Everybody knew who I was. And I mean, it wasn't big time, or anything. Like, I did have some connections to the Mexican mafia, but, neither here nor there. I knew I needed a change, and that's why I moved to Pennsylvania. And that's when I finally got clean.
So how did you get clean? Maybe this can help someone. Like, what was the process for you?
I know this is going to be hard to believe, but it was pretty much cold turkey. It was just me waking up one day, looking at myself and being like, I do not want to be this anymore. Like, I'm not getting anywhere. I feel like I'm going in circles. How do I get out of this? And actually, I had such a hard time in college. I was rebellious against some of the professors. Because I wrote a paper, and it was a really good paper. It needed to be a how-to paper. So I wrote a paper about how to, get off of addiction, how to come out of addiction.
Wow.
And my professor told me that she wasn't going to accept the paper because she didn't like the content. And I said, well, I'm not rewriting the paper. So you can give me an F, whatever you want to do, but I'm not rewriting it. But so the way that I got off was I had to change my location. I had to get everybody out of my life that I had a connection to, everyone, because I could not have it near me. I was going to do it probably, or be tempted to do it.
Yeah. So, people, places, things, man. People, places, things.
Yeah. So that's why the move was a big part, and then that's when I got into early child care. I started working at a daycare, and I fell in love with working with children. And I've always loved kids, where I babysat whenever I was younger, and I always loved it. And I knew I wanted to be a teacher. That's what I went to school for. But that's when I really fell in love with the preschool years, because I think that the first 5 years, especially the ages of 2 and 3, are so important.
Crucial,
and so many of the synapses are being built, and that make you who you are as an adult, how you think and how you your fight, flight, or fight modes, and how you deal with things.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot. It's like it's interesting that you say what you said about addiction, because a lot of people, whenever they ask me, like, how do you get off, how do you do, And for me, I found out it's the same thing, it's just all these 12 steps and all these, meetings and stuff like that, AA, NA, whatever, they're great. But I think the only way that it's fully going to work is if you literally wake up one day and you are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And you're like, you know what, I'm done, and that time comes for different people, in different stages of their life. But congratulations for being clean, man. It's a battle,
Yeah.
so congratulations. Yeah, I just, I love to like get, the story of who you are, because it's, a big part of your journey, a big part of your message. So again, thank you for sharing that. So what's up with Ecuador? Why did you decide on Ecuador?
Oh, goodness gracious. So that's a whole nother kind of like, call it the universe, call it a setup. I don't know. We shall see. Um, so,
Because that's a big
28.
that's a big move, man. Coming from America, it's a big move. So I'm curious.
Well, honestly, I've known that I wanted to come to South America for a long time. Like since I was a teenager, even in 2014, whenever I had applied to one of my the teaching job I was at the longest, I've been there for 10 years. In my interview, they asked, what do you see, in the future? And I was like, yeah, I'm only going to be here like maybe 3 or 5 years because I want to go to South America and open a school. So
Wow.
like I knew I was coming down here,
Hmm.
just the how, what, when, where, and why wasn't in place. But then 2018, I got out of um, another narcissistic relationship. That was a theme in my life, and it's rooted from the way I grew up and what I was accustomed to and used to.
Hmm.
And you carry that energy signature sort of in a way, and especially being an empath, you attract that kind of energy till you learn to set boundaries and
Yeah.
understand what's happening.
Same here,
Um,
man.
But so I got out of a relationship. I tried to go into the military, actually. I had gone the whole way. I'd taken the test. I cut off all my hair, in
Wow.
anticipation. I was, getting ready to do the physical, and my recruiter wanted me to lie about having cancer. And I'm like, what? I'm like, nope, that this is a huge setup. I'm like, I'm not going in lying and then end up getting what, dishonorably discharged. I'm
Hmm.
like, and they're not going to find out that I had cancer when I was taken care of on a military base. Like I was like, no, this is not for me. And this was actually the first and only time that my father called me. And
Hmm.
normally, like my mom's the one who always answers the phone at home. This was the time dad called me, and I was like, "Is dad calling me?" And he told me, he's like, "I don't think that you should go in the military because you do not like being told what to do,
Right.
and you're too free spirited." He's like, "I just do not think that it's a good fit for you."
But
You
wait,
know,
before I'm so sorry for cutting in, but I think this is very
and,
important before we continue with the Ecuador story. So you're like this super, special, being. You're on this journey, you're having visions, you're having out of body experiences, you're having all of these dreams. What the heck happened where you thought that you wanted to join the military? Like, what was your idea behind that?
well, that's the warrior spirit in me. Um, I wanted to like fight for something and like help people, and I did kind of I wanted to get physically fit, and I guess I was searching for some kind of a purpose and for something to fight for,
Hmm.
you know, and even if it meant, uncovering some secrets in the military. But that's probably why it ended up out me not going in, because it probably would have been uh, I probably would have been a pain in the ass for them.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because again, it's the military. Okay, so you get past that. Your dad calls you. He says, "Don't go." You actually listen to him, right?
Yeah, I listen and I don't go.
Okay.
So that's when I start getting into like meditating and this whole spiritual kind of path.
Like actually the
Meeting
practice
people,
side of it, right?
practicing. Um, I was like taking courses in psychometry, like, learning how to touch and feel objects and I was trying to explore my gifts that I knew I had as a child. So in that I met people, and I met this one lady who owned a business. It's kind of She owned a business that was a mix between like chiropractor and Reiki.
Mm.
So it's like, body alignment, and she also did Psych K. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah.
Um, so I met her in like 2019, and I met a Buddhist monk who I went on a hike with and had this wonderful experience with. And so it was a couple years of doing this, and I ended up going to that lady's house for a New Year's Eve party. And she mentions that she's looking for a farm in South America to open a healing center,
Wow.
and like open it up to me coming with her. And
Wow.
I was like, hell yeah.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, I've always wanted to go to South America. Here's this lady. I've known her for a couple of years. She's doing, all this great work. Like, let's do this.
Wow.
And this was shortly after I wrote my first book, too.
This is like the
So,
stars align, man. And I want to go back to your first book, but like this is the stars aligning, right?
right. Yeah. Or, like I said, or a setup, because it didn't quite turn out the way that I thought it was going to down here.
I
So
mean, it's
now
not
I'm kind of gonna.
it never turns out the way you think. But okay, so you actually take the leap and you go, right? So this is like 2019.
Well, no, 2019 is when I met her. So this was January 2024.
Mm.
So I wrote my first book in 2023, which ties in because it's titled When Pigs Fly. And it actually talks about someone taking a journey to a new land where they use words that we
I'm
might not
sorry,
understand.
I'm sorry, you cut out when you said the title. Can you please repeat it?
When Pigs Fly.
Okay. So can you get into that a little bit and let us know maybe where we can get the book?
All of the books I'm self-published on Amazon. So
Great.
all of the books are on Amazon. I have a Google sites that you can just search Willow Roots.
Yeah,
Google
make
sites.
sure that you send me at the end, make sure you send me all the links, that way I can plug them into the description. So like without revealing all of it, like because you said it ties into the journey and stuff. So what is the book about and who is it for?
So the book, and I say all my writing, I think is for all ages, because it is literally my life experience in poetry. So it's put to a kid's standard that they can understand it and learn language with the rhyming, but it also has a lot of adult content. That a kid isn't necessarily going to catch on, but an adult will.
Hmm.
So the first book talks about someone going on a journey to a new land where they use words that we might not understand. And, it mentions how when pigs fly, maybe I will too, and cats and dogs, and perhaps even you. So this was 3 months. September was when I published it. And January was when I decided I was going to Ecuador. So this was like before I even knew that this was happening. It was like the book literally manifested into life. And that's what I've kind of found with my writing.
Hmm.
I know this is words are magic.
Yeah.
And I feel like I was a scry in another life, some sort of a magician or a witch. I think words can cast spells,
Hmm.
and I manifest. They come true.
Yeah.
Every single one of my books somehow.
Prophetic, man. I find a lot of the same with my songs, that It turns out, years later, like I'm looking back, like holy crap, this was like a self-fulfilled prophecy. So you get down to Ecuador. What is that like for you?
Okay. Well, I sold my house, left everything, but except I did bring my dog and my cat. I had a rabbit who got left behind. I am Sergeant Pepper. I miss you wherever you are.
Oh, shout out
Um,
to.
but so I get down here, and it's a beautiful finca. I actually I drew the house, one of the houses on the property when I was a kid. Is that I later
What?
realized, yeah, because I had this house that I drew when I was a kid that had a tree like growing through it, and on the property on this finca had one of the buildings had a tree going
Yo,
through the
that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Wow.
So things are good. Me and the lady were on the finca with another woman and another man from Australia, actually. And um, I was getting I was getting acquainted with the farm hands, the locals there that were working on the farm already, taking care of like the coconut trees and the fruit trees. And I really wanted to dive into because it was a moringa tree farm,
Hmm.
and moringa has a lot of medicinal purposes. And so I really wanted to dive into learning about that. And the the farmhand man Pedro, I got close to him, like he was showing me how to water things, and even though I didn't speak any, I speak very little Spanish, and he speaks only Spanish. It was really good, but the energy just started getting off, and I started diving into the history of the place, and we started to find some like really dark stuff that happened with
And what are
the
you
family
talking
that
about?
was
Like
before.
ritualistically, or just history wise?
This is going to be hard to explain. Like like spiritually, things that happened to the father there. He ended up passing away. I'm not 100% sure of the whole story, but then I also ran into some paperwork that I can share it with you that was about extraterrestrial beings.
Okay.
Um, and it was talking about how, like, uh, it was tying into Australia, and I guess some sort of a being starting there in Australia. It almost gave me a little bit of feel of like that was planted for me to find by that
Mm.
Australian couple that was there, because it felt like it was saying, how do I explain this? That like Australians are the superior kind of race because
Huh.
we were here first or something.
Huh.
Kind of how Africa is, claiming all life started here in Africa, so we're like the first ones, here on this earth. And then some people claim that the Galapagos Islands is the cradle of life, and this is where life on Earth started. It just feels like a huge battle for people to claim where it all started at. And I wish people wouldn't get so fixated on that because it doesn't matter at this point, and especially not with me believing in like reincarnation. And me, I don't even believe I'm originally from this planet at all.
Right.
So we just need to realize that we're all just beings in this whole universe, and we have to just live and not get so fixated on, what do they call that, like nationalism and
Hmm.
patriotism, when
Right.
we just need to work together instead of trying to divide and compete. And yeah,
But
so
what
the
was
energy has started to feel off.
okay? But what do you
um,
mean? What do you mean by off? What does that mean? Like, can you describe that feeling? Is it fear? Is it like anger? Is it
Yeah,
like
it's like anxiety. It's like I can feel it in my body, mainly like in my gut. You know, like and it's an inner voice just telling me like something is not right.
Prove to me that you're alive.